My name is Jaxon, and for years I played the part they expected of me, the outsider, the man who would never be worthy of their perfect little world. My father-in-law made it his mission to remind me of that every chance he got. But what he never realized was this: while he was busy looking down on me, I was building an empire right under his nose. So when he told my wife to leave me, believing I'd walk away with nothing, he had no idea he just orchestrated his own downfall. By the time he realized the house he adored, the wealth he flaunted, and the security he took for granted had never truly belonged to him, it was already too late. And I simply smiled and walked away. I smiled and walked away the moment he realized I owned everything he had schemed for, but by then it was already too late. The day Richard Thompson decided my time in his family was up, he truly believed he had won. The arrogance in his voice, the way he leaned back in his leather chair with a self-satisfied smirk, told me everything I needed to know. He thought this was the moment he would finally erase me from his daughter's life, wiping away the last stain on the pristine legacy he had so carefully crafted. "Jaxon, let's not pretend anymore," he said, swirling the bourbon in his glass as if this was just another business deal. "You don't belong in this family. You never have." I leaned against the edge of his mahogany desk, silent, letting him play out his well-rehearsed performance. He exhaled dramatically, feigning concern. "You're a good man, but you and I both know Elena deserves better, someone from her world, someone who can give her the life she was born into. You understand, don't you?" The audacity of the man was almost impressive. Across the estate, I could hear the hum of laughter from the brunch guests still lingering on the terrace. My wife, Elena, was probably sipping champagne, completely unaware of the little coup her father was attempting to orchestrate. She had no idea that, at this very moment, her father was offering me a deal to walk away, to leave quietly, to disappear from their picture-perfect lives. I let him continue. "If you go now, I'll make sure you don't walk away empty-handed," Richard said smoothly, as if he were doing me a favor. "A settlement, something generous. Of course, it won't be enough for you to live extravagantly, but enough to start over." He paused, tilting his head as if studying my reaction. "But if you fight this, Jaxon? If you make this difficult? Well, let's just say I have the kind of power that could make life unpleasant for you." It took everything in me not to laugh. I met his gaze, my expression unreadable, while inside I marveled at the sheer irony of the moment. Here was a man so blinded by his own superiority, so convinced of his own importance, that he had never once considered a world in which I was the one holding all the power. The house he loved to show off to his friends? Not his. The luxury lifestyle he believed was funded by his family's old money? Not even close. The empire he thought I was leeching off his daughter for? Mine. And he had no idea. Not a single clue that the man he had spent years looking down on was the one who had been keeping his carefully curated world afloat. I should have corrected him right then and there. I should have told him that he was standing in my house, that his daughter's designer wardrobe, her vacations, her cars, everything came from me, not him. That the very wealth he was so eager to protect had never belonged to him in the first place. But where's the fun in that? Instead, I exhaled slowly, setting down my empty glass on his desk with precision. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice calm, measured. Richard smirked, mistaking my quiet for submission. He reached for a manila folder, probably divorce papers, already drawn up. He was efficient, I'd give him that. But he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I turned without another word and walked away, leaving him to believe he had won. He had no idea the war had only just begun. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and aged whiskey as I stepped out of Richard's study, my pulse steady, my mind already calculating. He truly thought he had orchestrated my downfall, set everything into motion with the ease of a man who had never known what it felt like to lose. But Richard Thompson had just made his first fatal error, underestimating me. Before we continue this story, I want to connect with you, my incredible viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop the flag of your country in the comments below. Now, let's dive back in. That night, I didn't tell Elena about my conversation with her father. I didn't have to. I could already see the signs, small shifts in her demeanor, the way she watched me, hesitated before speaking. She was conflicted, but not in the way most people would expect. It wasn't love that held her back. It was comfort. Security. Elena had never known struggle. She had never had to fight for anything in her life. Everything she had ever wanted had been handed to her on a silver platter. And now her father was promising her something new, a future without me, but with every privilege still intact. She just had to let me go. And slowly, bit by bit, she was starting to believe him. At first, it was subtle. She would linger longer on phone calls with her father, her voice softer, more uncertain. Then came the comments, carefully placed, each one designed to plant doubt. I feel like we're from such different worlds, Jaxon. I don't want us to hold each other back. My dad says I should be with someone who truly understands me. I watched her closely, never interrupting, never pushing back. Let her talk. Let her convince herself. Because the more she believed she was the one making this decision, the harder she would fall when she realized the truth. The final push came late one evening. I had just stepped into the bedroom when I heard it, Elena's hushed voice, whispering urgently into her phone. I just don't know how to tell him. He won't fight it? Are you sure? I mean, I don't want him to be hurt. A pause. A sigh. All right, I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow. That's when she was planning to end it. I smiled in the darkness, a quiet, knowing thing. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, I woke early, moving through our house with a sense of purpose. I let her have her moment, let her take her time, let her believe she had the upper hand. And finally, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat across from me, hands folded neatly in her lap, expression carefully rehearsed. Jaxon, I think we should separate. I tilted my head slightly, pretending to process her words as if they had the power to shake me. Oh. She hesitated. This wasn't the reaction she expected. No anger. No devastation. Just calm. We want different things, she continued, her voice faltering. And I think it's best if that's what you want, I said smoothly, cutting her off. She blinked, startled. Wait, you're not upset? Why would I be? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, uncertain for the first time. I watched as the realization began to creep in. This wasn't going the way she had imagined. I stood up, stretching slightly, as if I had just been handed the most casual piece of news. I'll give you some space, I said, walking toward our bedroom. I'll stay somewhere else for a while. The look on her face was priceless. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't prepared for it. Because Richard had convinced her that I would fight. That I would beg. That I would break. But the thing about power? The person who holds it is the one who walks away first. That night, I checked into a 5-star hotel, the same one Richard had once bragged about hosting charity events in. The irony was almost poetic. I ordered a glass of their finest scotch and sat by the window looking down at the city skyline. Tomorrow morning, Richard would wake up believing he had won. And by the time he realized what he had truly lost, it would already be too late. Morning arrived like a quiet storm. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when the messages started rolling in. First, a call from Elena. Then another. I let them ring, watching as her desperation grew with each unanswered attempt. I already knew what had happened. The realization had hit her. Hard. At exactly 9:42 a.m., a new name flashed across my screen. Richard Thompson. I smirked. Right on schedule. By noon, my lawyer sent me a simple text. He called. He's starting to understand. That was the moment Richard learned the truth. The house he believed was part of his family's legacy. Not his. The estate he had paraded around for years, hosting lavish parties, reminding everyone of his old money status? A mere illusion. The paperwork had been finalized long before I even married Elena. It had never been his to claim. I imagined his reaction, the way his face must have paled as he spoke to the bank, his voice growing more frantic with every passing second. Check again, he must have barked. There must be some mistake. But there was no mistake. The only thing Richard had ever truly owned was his arrogance. And today, that had officially run out. By 3 p.m., my lawyer forwarded another message. Richard just called. Furious. He says the bank is refusing to discuss the mortgage with him because his name isn't on it. Wants to sort this out immediately. I chuckled, taking another sip of my scotch. Let him stew. By evening, the dam had cracked wide open. I arrived at the estate just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Richard was already waiting in the driveway, pacing, his face twisted with barely contained rage. Elena stood beside him, her expression unreadable, but I knew better. The mask was slipping. I stepped out of my car with deliberate ease, straightening my sleeves. Richard, I greeted smoothly. Elena. Cut the bullshit, Richard snapped. Tell me what the hell is going on. I exhaled, feigning confusion. I'm not sure I understand. This house, he growled, gesturing wildly. Why is the bank saying my name isn't on the mortgage? Why is my financial manager telling me I don't have access to the estate's funds? I tilted my head. Because you don't. Silence. For the first time in his life, Richard Thompson looked truly lost. That doesn't make sense, Elena cut in, her voice strained. My father has owned this estate for years. Since before I was born. No, sweetheart, I interrupted, my voice calm. He hasn't. I turned back to Richard, watching as realization began to dawn. This house? The one you've called your family's legacy? The one you thought you could use to push me out. I smiled, slow and deliberate. It's mine. Richard's jaw clenched. You're lying. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a neatly folded document. The deed. I handed it to him, watching as his fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded it. And there it was, printed in black and white. My name. Not his. Richard staggered back a step, his face draining of color. No, he muttered, shaking his head. No, this isn't possible. Oh, it's very possible, I said smoothly. You see, I bought this house before Elena and I got married. It was never part of your estate. You just assumed it was. I let the words settle. And I never corrected you. Elena took a sharp breath. But that means she turned to me, her eyes wide. Jaxon, what about the businesses? I finished for her, amusement flickering in my tone. Also mine. Richard's hands clenched into fists. You son of a... Careful, I warned, my voice dropping just slightly. You're still standing on my property. His nostrils flared, his entire body vibrating with fury. You think you've won? He spat. You think this trick means anything? I raised an eyebrow. Richard, let's be honest. This isn't just about the house, is it? It's about control. It's about power. And the fact that for years you believed you had both. I took a step closer, my voice low, lethal. But you never did. His chest heaved. He looked at Elena as if expecting her to defend him. But she didn't. Because for the first time she understood. Everything, the wealth, the comfort, the security, it had never come from her father. It had come from me. And now? She had nothing. I turned, heading back toward my car, but not before delivering one final parting shot. You wanted to be free of me, I said over my shoulder. Well, congratulations. I glanced back, my smirk widening. You got exactly what you wanted. Then I drove away, leaving them standing there. And I didn't look back. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in his life, Richard Thompson had nothing to say. No threats. No condescending remarks. No smug reassurances that he was in control. Because he wasn't. By the time I returned to my penthouse suite at the hotel, my phone was flooded with messages. Some from Elena. Most from Richard. Calls. Texts. Desperate attempts to undo what had already been set in stone. I didn't answer. Because there was nothing left to say. The next morning, the fallout began. Richard had spent decades building an empire on perception, his reputation, his status, the illusion of generational wealth. But illusions shatter easily under pressure, and his was already beginning to crack. By noon, news had spread through his social circles. The whispers began. How had he lost control of his own estate? His own assets? His own daughter's future? By the end of the day, the board of his company, what was left of it, had called an emergency meeting. Investors were panicking. Clients were pulling out. The illusion was crumbling, and Richard had no way to stop it. And then, the final blow. 2 days later, I received a message from an old business acquaintance, someone who had been on the receiving end of Richard's arrogance more than once. You won't believe what's happening. I already had an idea. He's being forced out. The board's making a move to push him from his own company. They're saying his leadership has been compromised, reckless decisions, financial mismanagement. Rumor has it they found out about the house. About how much he actually controls, which isn't much at all. I sat back in my chair, staring at the message for a long moment. Richard had spent years treating people like pawns, believing himself untouchable. But the thing about power? The moment people realize you don't have it, they stop listening to you. And just like that, the kingdom he had spent a lifetime building was slipping through his fingers. By the end of the week, he was removed as CEO. By the end of the month, he was fighting off lawsuits from former investors. And Elena? She wasn't doing much better. Without her father's influence, the life she had grown so comfortable in began to fall apart. No more luxury trips. No more designer shopping sprees. No more limitless credit cards. She reached out to me once. Just once. A text message. Jaxon, can we talk? I stared at it for a moment, fingers hovering over the screen. And then I deleted it. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Richard once told me I would never be good enough for his family. And in the end, he was right. Because I wasn't just good enough. I was better. This story is more than just a thrilling revenge tale. It carries powerful lessons about strength, patience, and justice. It reminds us that true power isn't about status or wealth, it's about having control over yourself. Jaxon didn't need to lash out or seek petty revenge. He simply walked away and let those who underestimated him suffer the consequences of their own arrogance. This story also serves as a warning: never underestimate someone just because they don't flaunt their success. While Richard believed he had everything under control, the truth was he never really owned anything at all. The proud will always fall, while those who play the long game will always win. Now, I want to hear from you. If you loved this story and think it was the perfect power move, comment number 2 below. If you think it could have been even better, comment number 7. And if you want to hear more explosive, unexpected, and inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Mr.HeartVibes right now. Your support means everything, and it keeps me motivated to bring you even more incredible stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Fire!